Hi there. Welcome to the podcast and welcome to Kitchen Conversations. We've got a pretty straightforward goal. We hope each episode inspires at least one person to pick up the paddle and play their very first game of pickleball. And our next guest probably took the game a little further than most of us will. He actually went as far as getting himself inducted into the Pickleball Hall of Fame in 2019. It's an incredible story. His dad was inducted in 2017. You probably figured out I'm talking about Hall of Famer Steve Paranto. Now, full disclosure, when you get a chance to sit down and talk to someone like Steve, you tend to be a bit nervous. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I think that shows up in this podcast. I didn't do a great job on my side of the microphone, but I have to tell you, Steve Paranto was kind, he was patient, and he was generous. And I ultimately really ended up enjoying my time with him. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Hall of Famer Steve Paranto on this episode of Kitchen Conversations. I'm going to start with an interesting question. At least I think it's interesting. But, you know, I've just met you a moment ago, and yet in some strange and funny way, I feel like I know you. And I'm wondering, with all of the content, Steve, that's out there about you and your legacy and going all the way back to maybe even that tournament in 1976, the Bicentennial Tournament, you're featured in the book, and you've referenced it a few times. Do you find it odd that when someone like me, a complete stranger, runs into you either at a tournament or at a clinic or here on a podcast, that we feel like we know you, yet we're completely, a complete stranger to you? I'm wondering if that's an interesting moment for you.
It's been really gratifying. It's at some events. I'll be at I still remember teaching clinics. In fact, I teach most summers on Bainbridge Island with my good friend Rob Davidson in his camp. And a lot of the students, especially a few years ago, I was really the one putting out instructional videos, quality instructional videos before COVID. My good buddy Spencer Laurent was shooting them with me. He was actually a student of mine. He was only in his 20s. He was a student of mine who had those skills. And now the crazy thing is Spencer is when you watch PPA on TV, he's the one running the show. He's the one producing those, working for the Tennis Channel. He's about 32 or 3 now, but he was only like 24, 25 shooting those videos in my backyard. But people would recognize me from those videos.
For sure.
So,
yeah.
And about 3 months ago, I was involved in an exhibition for the senior pro pickleball tour in Seattle, that they were having the finals there. And I was looking at the name on the back of a shirt and go, oh boy, that name sounds familiar. And I went to one of his teammates and they said, well, that's former Heisman Trophy winner. And so I thought, I'm going to go just take a picture of this famous guy. Just, he's playing pickleball. He's a pro pickleball player now, and he was a Heisman Trophy winner. And then as I'm walking over to him, he walks over to me and he says, hi, Steve. I learned how to play pickleball by watching your videos.
Wow, what a moment.
Yeah, so that kind of thing, it's surprising.
Tell me the important role that your mom and dad played in your life and the credit that you give them, because I couldn't find a lot of specific questions about that in some of the things I was seeing online. So I would love for you to just kind of run with that story.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that, because tomorrow I'm speaking at a health fair and I'm starting out. The first thing I'm going to say, I'm just trying to figure out right now my speech. But what I wanted to say was, when I look back on my life, and I'm 70 years old now, when people look back and you think, what made me the person I am today? And I think of 3 big things. And number 1 is my parents. And number 2 is me choosing the profession as being a teacher. And then number 3 is this crazy thing of pickleball. How those 3 things, what would my life be like today without those 3 things? Well, my parents would have supported me in any endeavor I chose. I mean, when I think of being a 11-year-old, maybe kind of a shy 10, 11-year-old, I am an only child, and maybe a little bit on the shy side. And then I loved watching this ventriloquist, Paul Winchell. This is this is a ventriloquist big in the 50s, but I was probably watching replays, and I just loved what I want to do that. And Sears catalogs back then you could get ventriloquist mannequin dummy figure, for about $8.
Right.
And I wanted one. And back in those days, the Sears catalog was our internet. You circled the the things your
Hmm.
wish list and Sears catalog. I
Yeah.
know people my age will remember this. And I
Yeah.
wanted one of those really bad. And Dad heard that and kind of thought, I don't really want a doll for my, thinking it's a doll for your
Right.
son, right?
Right. Right.
Well, somehow my mom talked him into, I got really good at ventriloquism as a 10, 11-year-old and
Yeah.
it made me more outgoing. I was entertaining in the classroom. Well, what does my dad do? Well, now being the person really good with his hands, he gets a book by Paul Winchell, How to Make a
Oh,
Ventriloquist Dummy, just like his that he used on TV. And my dad made me a dummy. Um,
wow.
this is when I'm in fifth grade. And I got very good where I was entertaining at Cub Scout troop things. Dad would write my material, getting jokes. And then the big thing was when I was seventh, eighth grade, Vietnam was going on,
Yes.
and
Right.
I tried out for the troop that entertains the Vietnam veterans at Fort Lewis, and I made
Wow.
it. I was the I and there's
Okay.
a 2 hour show on Sundays once a month for the soldiers. And I made it. I was the only kid in the act. Dad wrote my routine, and it was probably some of it was borderline adult stuff, but I knew when to pause for the
Sure.
laughter. But what an experience for me to be in front of all these soldiers. And then you're a junior high kid who's worried about going to Vietnam himself.
Hmm.
Dad and I would go every month early and shoot pool. One of our other things. We'd shoot pool, and I'd be looking around at these guys. And I was a big Beatles guy. I liked long hair, and I love the Beatles.
Sure.
And I'm looking around, go, oh, man, if I go to war, I have to get my hair cut. And then I'm thinking, how many of these people are going to die and not make it
Yeah.
back? I'm just thinking
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So it was pretty impactful. But so there's an example. I wanted to take up ventriloquism, and then I had the support from both parents. And here my dad goes in, but writes my
Yeah.
routines, um, does everything for me. So I could go on and on about every hobby that I took up. I can't remember one that they shut me down and said, no, we're not going to do that one.
Yeah. So, Steve, so obviously sitting here today and all that you've accomplished both in and out of the sport and your career, your working career, and all of those choices that you made that turned out so well for you. I mean, to have supportive parents today. And I think if we look at the struggles that some of the younger kids are having today across the globe, and some of the challenges that they're facing, I think a lot of it, I think that family core, at least for us, and we see it through our kids' friends and different structures within families. I think that's one of the missing elements today. I think there's a challenge there in trying to keep the family at the kitchen table, collecting your thoughts at the end of the day, sharing stories, and just connecting on that family level. And it certainly sounds to me like your dad was certainly an influential part of all that you've done today. How would you describe him to someone who didn't have a chance to meet him? Someone said, "Tell me about your dad." How would you start that conversation?
Well, he loved people. Um,
Hmm.
Definitely was a people person. He just liked, and he's one of those people that never said anything bad about another person.
Right.
I think and he got that from his dad. From dad always told me that too. But I just could always see the positive. He would always get a kick out of every individual. I mean, that's just I love it when I'm with my friends currently who got to know my dad because I can
Yeah.
talk about my dad with them. But that's the big thing. I mean, he was very inventive. I mean, that's why with this whole thing about the pickleball paddles,
Yes.
I watched Dad invent quite a few things before that. He worked for Boeing and he was an engineer, and he was always coming up with ideas to save Boeing money. And that he would always
Hmm.
put ideas in the idea box, and it wound up then they put him in the head of a cost savings division. So the whole paddle situation,
Yeah.
uh, we were using wooden paddles that were very heavy. I was already
Hmm.
teaching school. Dad was my biggest fan, going to all our tournaments in Tacoma, watching me and my high school buddy Richard Skevington play tournaments, and we were losing in the finals to the same team. Um, at least it happened like 2 or 3 times in a row. And I came home and a little frustrated, thinking, God, I'm not the biggest, strongest person. It'd sure be nice if I had a lighter paddle. I weighed my wood paddle, and it was the ratio of it compared to the pickleball was 13 times heavier,
Right.
but my tennis racket was only 7 times heavier. I said to Dad, someone
Mhm.
needs to invent a paddle that's lighter. And of course, then the next week he's visiting me in Oregon and throws down 2 paddles on the floor. I still remember him tossing them on the floor. And I go,
Wow.
whoa. And I
Yeah.
still remember that day. Here, those 2 orange paddles cut out from floor paddling. And then I had a court at my house.
Yeah.
Dad was playing by then. We went out in the backyard. First hit. Wow, it makes this cool sound. Oh, I think my sweet spot's bigger. I think the ball's going faster.
Wow.
And
What a moment.
and
What a
and
moment,
and
Steve.
so he was one of those people that I would purposely say things like that in front of, like, gee, if
Mhm.
only someone would invent. And it happened several times after that too. And then, in fact, products that became popular in elementary school PE. I was the idea person, and Dad knew how to make them and figure
Yeah.
out materials needed.
Did you have a sense that day, Steve, when you were talking about the ratio difference between tennis and tennis balls versus the pickleball paddles that you're using in the day and the ball? Did you kind of know in the back of your mind, Dad's going to solve this for me? Did you have
I
that
was
sense, or
that
did he surprise you?
that's yeah. I no, I wasn't surprised. That's
Right.
exactly what I was
Yeah.
hoping he would do, because I knew I had no idea.
Sure.
I'm sure as soon as I said that, bingo, in his head goes, honeycomb floor paneling.
Yeah.
Um, he
So
didn't
he
tell me.
must have been yeah, sorry. I was going to say he must have been a relatively curious man as well. Someone that was consistently looking at things from maybe a different perspective than the rest of us would, and finding
Yeah.
solutions, or maybe a better mousetrap, if you will, to get to that. So what a great
I
moment.
think that comes from, because I hear stories of he grew up in the Dakotas, where you
Uh-huh.
had your own machinery. He grew up with an airplane that his dad would keep running, and they would fly it out of their yard. I mean, it was like open space. And and you had to make all your machinery when things broke. Oh, and his dad owned a bakery. Well, things are breaking all the time, and or
Right.
you want to make them better. And so I think he watched his dad
Mhm.
continuously
Yeah.
innovate, make things better, keep things working. And dad was along those same
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think that's, again, part of the change that's happened, over the last several decades, where, we've gotten away from some of that hands-on learning. And I think if you grow up that way, you end up sort of applying a lot of that to your life. Yeah, terrific stuff. Steve, that moment with those paddles, where do you place that in the importance of pickleball history today? I mean, so much has happened to the game since its inception, and Bainbridge
Yeah.
Island and all that's come after it. In your personal opinion, because I think the pickleball world in general places that very, very high on the level of monumental changes to the game that really shifted it and made it perhaps more accessible, more entertaining, more challenging, more competitive. But on a personal note, where do you place that?
Well, of course, I place it very high. I mean, I think there's an absolute chance, and even I think Jennifer Lucor,
Yeah,
who wrote the history book, would even say that there's a possibility the sport would have died if we
right.
just continued playing with wooden paddles, or one of these other racket sports would have taken over. I mean, already we have there's like 5 competitors that we have with pickleball. None of them
Mhm.
have been able to do what pickleball has. Partly it's because of the ingenious rules that the inventors made. But
Yeah.
wooden paddles were not as fun to use. They were heavy, harder for kids
Mhm.
to play, harder for seniors, just heavy, heavy, heavy. Um, you wouldn't want to get hit in the head with a 13-ounce wooden paddle, by the way, by your
No,
partner.
good point. Yeah, fair point. Yeah, for sure. Oh, it's fascinating. The other story, Steve, that's well known and you've been generous to share with the world, is your dad's ashes, where
Oh
we
yeah.
paddle tap in the playhouse. And that one really caught me. That one caught me in the heart because, I lost my dad 30 years ago to bone cancer. And
Mm.
it was a tough journey. But the one thing my dad did every morning before he headed out the door was he splashed a little Old Spice on his face.
Yeah.
And so when I lost dad, I wasn't using Old Spice at that point, but I started that day. And every morning, including today, when I get going and I get my act together, I take a moment and pull out the standard classic
Nice.
white Old Spice and I splash a little on. And it gives me that moment every day, Steve, to just reflect on the things that my dad gave me in life. And I think the three that I would point out are honesty, integrity, and a work ethic. And I think, as a father to a son, that's probably, three of the greatest gifts you can impart on someone. And all of those have served me well in life. So I have a fond reflection of my dad. And although I lost him a bit earlier than I'd hoped, and anyone hopes, you don't want to lose your father in your 20s, but he left
Yeah.
a lasting impression on me. And so when I heard the story about what you had done, I just want to say on a very personal note, I was really touched by that. I thought that was really, really an interesting thing that you decided to do.
When you say work ethic and integrity,
Yes.
you learn those things not by them giving, sitting down and telling you, but
Yeah.
by watching them. And
100%.
and I got a million stories. I still remember Dad took me to a boxing match in Seattle or Tacoma. I was a little kid. I
Yeah.
was 6, 7, and we were getting ready to leave after the boxing match, and there was a wallet on the ground in front of us. And there
Ah,
were people, and he picks it up and he looks at he goes, "Well, we have to find this person." And so, he found, and so I still remember, there's money in it, of course. And I still remember us going home, him dialing back then, dialing the phone,
yeah. Yeah.
calling this number and
Yeah.
says, I think, is this so and so? And, and just teaching me the honesty of that. So there's the story, integrity. And, but
Yes.
oh, when you mention work ethic,
Mhm.
Dad always went to work no matter what, maybe not even feeling good.
Yeah.
And he would tell me stories. Yeah, I think some people are just calling in sick, and when they're not. He says, I'm never going to do that. I'm going to work. And that made an impression on me. As a school teacher, I taught for 30 years. Yeah, I could probably
Yeah.
count on two hands, my fingers, how many days I missed school because I was really sick. Um,
Yeah.
and and I can't say that about every school teacher. And so that
Yeah.
that made an impression on me. The things, just him as an example, setting those examples for me.
Yeah, it's a great story, Steve. I had a similar one with Dad. We were at a hardware store one day looking at a few things, and he needed a 9-volt battery, and he had picked that up first and inadvertently put it in his coat pocket while he fumbled with something else. And so we paid for the something else, which I don't recall what it was, not important. And we get home. We lived about 10 minutes from the hardware store. And we get home, and Dad realizes I've got the battery in my pocket, put me back in the car, drove back to the hardware store,
Yeah.
walked in and said, I'm sorry. This is what happened. I'd like to pay for my battery. And I
Uh,
remember as a kid, oh, I don't want to get back in the car. I want
yeah.
to go and play with my friends. But Dad
Yeah.
put me back in the car. Dad could have just gone and dealt with that. But no, he put me in the car, drove me back to the hardware store, dragged me in and showed me how you handle a situation like that. So yeah, it's nice that we
Yeah.
both have that fondness
It's
for our parents.
Yeah, and it's setting those examples. When you mentioned Dad's ashes, so I put them, my playhouse is my dream house.
Mm,
My I just it's a place
yeah,
where my friends play. I have fun watching. I have fun playing. I have 2 indoor courts. I have other games that grew up playing: pool table, ping pong table, shuffleboard, pinball, other
beautiful.
things. But I put Dad's ashes at on each court where we tap paddles. And
Yeah.
there's another example. Dad set example of always being a good sport.
Hmm.
Sometimes that isn't that easy for competitors like me. And my mom was more of the competitive side. Um, super competitive where losing, she'd rather almost die than lose,
Right, right.
and uh D- Dad could always deal with he'd play his hardest. I mean, that's the example I love, is play your hardest, and then afterwards maybe have a beer together with the guys
Hmm.
that beat you. Or vice versa. So his ashes are right there, and I think of him every time I see all my friends tap paddles.
Yeah, what a tribute, Steve. What a terrific idea. I'm so glad that you're willing to share that with the world, because that could have been a very private moment. That could have just been something you decide to keep to yourself. But the fact that you've shared that, I really applaud you for that. How's your mom factor into this? I read a story, heard a story, saw a story, something to do with the lake neighbors hollering over.
Yeah. Yeah.
She gets kind of fired up, I guess. So mom had the fiery spirit. Dad was kind
Yep.
of the calm, cool, collect, let's deal with it in a logical way. But mom was pretty fierce, was she?
Yes, she was very competitive and feisty,
Yeah.
um, and I think she got that from her dad,
Right.
from all the stories I hear. And she was a little. She wasn't very. She didn't weigh 100 pounds. She was about 5'4", 95 pounds, and her dad was
Okay.
probably 5'7", 110 or something like that. And he was a guy that, from the stories I hear, could scare anybody.
Right.
So he was feisty too. But yeah, mom did not like losing. I love playing games with her though, because I like firing her up. I mean, we're talking table tennis matches with each other. We're talking cribbage, anything,
Sure.
And it was just fun playing games with her. I mean, it was feisty, but it was also, that it's, I don't want to explain it. We liked making each other, riling each other up. Um, Back in those junior high days, elementary school and junior high days, we had a ping pong table. And I'm, like I said, I'm an only child, so my playmates were my parents, and both my parents were athletic and
Hmm.
good at table tennis. And we would play, back then games were to 21, not nowadays it's 11, you serve 2 days, it's all different. But anyway, we'd play games at 21, and if, dad beat me 21-15, I owed him 6 cents. It was a penny a
Oh,
point.
okay.
And
Yep.
same with mom. Well, by the time junior high rolled around, I got so that they couldn't beat me, and then mom quit playing for money.
That was it. She wants you to break the bank. Yeah. I can't
Yeah,
play with you anymore. You've
yeah,
gotten too good. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny the different roles that our parents can play in our life, Stephen. It's just great that you're willing to share a bit of that today. So thank you for all of that. Tell me about your teaching career. I've got a son that's just completing his master's in education in the city
Mm,
of Ottawa here in Ontario, Canada, and cannot wait to get in the classroom. Adam has always been passionate about teaching and sharing information. He'd gone through for human kinetics and kinesiology at one point, Steve, and then decided, you know what? I don't really like dealing with the athlete in the moment of the injury. So wrapping them with tape and touching them and getting them ready to go and sit in the bench. That wasn't his thing. But what he really took away from it was imparting, the post-injury instructions. And he kind of tied that back to teaching. And so he decided to once he completed that program, to take teachers college and subsequently his master's program. So what are your reflections on teaching in the classroom today? And what changes did you see between the beginning of your teaching career and sort of the day of retirement?
Well, first off, I'm glad you're saying your son can't wait to get in the classroom, because
Yeah.
those are the teachers we need. We need passionate teachers. That's the number one important thing in the education in the school system, is
Yeah.
passionate teachers that want to be important to people involved with those kids.
Hmm.
So I was and again, when I look back on those three important things in my life, choosing the teaching profession, I don't know what I'd be like today without that experience. So I taught 30 years of elementary physical education.
Wow.
When I decided I wanted to be a PE teacher, it wasn't to teach elementary PE. I wanted to be that coach at the high school that,
Right.
coached the tennis team,
Sure.
that kind of. And then the way they work it in your in your program at college, they put you student teaching at the elementary school and the high school. And so I was, spending months at elementary school as a teacher and then months at a high school. And I realized, wow, I really like this elementary
Right.
level. I'm really
Right.
teaching. These kids are really learning stuff from me, and it's important to them and it's fun. The
Hmm.
the high school experience was, maybe, maybe I'll try. I don't. I just. I mean, I'm sure you can be impactful at that. There's teachers who are really good at high school level, but I found my calling was elementary. So I was working with 6-year-olds to 12-year-olds for 30 years.
Right.
My I was so fortunate with this. I got my teaching job about 3 weeks before even graduating from college. The interview
Mm.
we I went to the interview. Um, I found out later I got interviewed by a principal and a PE teacher. And I found out later from the PE teacher, because we became good friends later, we played basketball together, that
Sure.
I wasn't the principal's first choice. I was the second choice, but
Oops.
I was the PE teacher's first choice. Well, later, I think my uh, principal was probably very happy that he hired
Yes.
me because I did some innovative things. But so I opened a brand new school as a 23-year-old.
Wow.
That means ordering your own equipment, coming up with, setting up the playground. Where do the basketball hoops go? Where do we put the wall ball courts? Where do we, put, doing all that? And I loved that opportunity to set up a new school, and you're part of a new culture. You're building a new culture in a
Hmm.
community. And I was fortunate also because there were also a lot of other young teachers in this building, which don't always
Right.
happen. So I
Right.
got to be around people my age and also older teachers, of course, and experienced administrators. And then 10 years later, I did it again. I applied for another new school, and then 10 years later, I did it again. So I opened three
Check,
schools
check.
and every 10 years. And then the last school I opened, I got put on the planning team that hired all the teachers. So that was a wonderful experience. And we hired
Yeah.
such great teachers. We would interview 25 people before we found one we liked.
Right.
And
Wow.
we're filling 30 spots. So you can imagine the quality of teachers that we had.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
that made that school so fun. That's where I was until I was, so that was my last school I taught at. I've been
Yeah.
retired now 16 years. In 2009, I retired.
Good for you. Well, to be able to go in on that first job at such a tender age, Steve, and have a blank canvas and a passion for
Yeah.
sports, obviously, and a passion for kids, and that's where Adam falls. He calls them the littles, is how he describes. He wants grade 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe. So
Oh,
he's
yeah.
sitting today. He's in a classroom in Ottawa today, subbing. There's no lack of subbing opportunities for him right now, and there's a demand for male teachers in the elementary level, specifically here in
It's
this part of the world. Yeah,
everywhere. So
yeah,
I watched that happen too. And my first year's teaching, it was very unusual to have a male teacher in first, second, third grade because the idea was, oh, you're not nurturing enough.
right.
Um, and then we found the importance of if you can get a quality male, a lot of those kids, especially, now might be in a single parent family without a dad at home.
Yeah.
And that that young, or it could be any age, male
Mm.
elementary teacher could be that important figure in your life.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've talked so passionately, both of us, about our dads and the role they played, and for some kids, they don't get that advantage, and I do
Mhm.
call it an advantage because it's so important. Steve, what did you see as a fundamental shift between sort of the first few years that you taught and subsequently the last few years, as it relates maybe to attitude from both coworkers and maybe more importantly parents? Because I see that, at least where we are in this part of the world, as one of the failures right now. The parents are not as engaged in the classroom and with the teacher, and they're not necessarily in sync. And I'm just wondering, did you see any of that in the final few years that you taught?
Well, here's what I saw. I by time I was teaching, I started in '79, so it wasn't that many
Right.
years that before that I was in school. And
Yeah.
at that time period, if you did anything wrong in school, it was your fault. When you went
Oh
home,
yeah.
you got in
Yeah.
trouble. It was your, and
Yeah.
then later on, and probably currently, a lot of times it's always the teacher's fault.
Yeah.
Why did and I mean, when I was in grade school, even maybe if I thought it wasn't my fault that the teacher should have done this, I would not tell my parents what happened if it was something that would get me in trouble, because it would be my parents would be upset with me. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, it was always going to be my fault. The teacher was kind of on a pedestal. Um,
Right.
I don't know if that's exactly what we want. I mean, we want teachers doing the right thing and everything. And in fact, my first years teaching, you could spank kids. Uh, I remember I still remember the student's name. Jace Branham did something. And he was one of my
Wow.
kids that loved PE, but he
Hmm.
was pretty hyper. But back then we were
Yeah.
say calling them hyper, but they were ADD.
Yes.
But
Yes.
and they love PE because they could get a lot of their emotions out and everything. But anyway, forgot what happened. But I took him to Mr. Huggett, our principal, the man who hired me, who I was going to be his second choice, but he hired
Right.
me. Um, by the way, I taught him pickleball later on, and he
Good.
became a big
Good. You
love. In
convert.
fact, I taught everybody pickleball at my school, and they all loved it. But anyway, um, you could choose. If the parents had signed a waiver, you could spank them.
Wow.
And Mr. Huggett said, "So do you want to do it, or do you want me to do it?" Well, I never spanked the kid. Well, no, you can do it, Mr. Huggett. And so it whack, whack, and almost looked like a pickleball paddle, about the same size, except it had holes in it, and it was wood. So, um,
Well, we've come a long way.
we've come a long way. I don't really want to be hitting kids
No.
at school,
No.
but I do want kids to be responsible for their behavior. And sometimes I don't know if they're held to that same responsibility that they were when we were maybe my
No.
first years teaching.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. And I think it's a classic case of the pendulum sometimes swinging too far one way and then the correction sends it flying the other way. And I think pickleball may be in that moment today. I think that, with the changes, and hopefully we'll touch base just lightly on some of those today and get your reflections. But we have to be careful when we're making, foundational or fundamental changes to anything, whether it be education, discipline, or the game that we all love, that we don't allow that pendulum to go too far the other way and create a whole new set of problems. So yeah, we've got some issues. So let's nudge it. But we're not really good at nudging. We tend to swing it, all the way to the far side sometimes. So yeah, interesting to hear you say that. When you talk about PE today, Steve, for me, my wife and I have really embraced health and wellness and fitness, and we try to look after ourselves. We eat clean. We're committed to, exercising and doing all the right things for longevity. Our goal is to be able to play pickleball in our 80s. We've got some club members here, and so the game has given me so much. But if you were to ask me, what's the greatest gift pickleball's given you outside of the socialization, which is just paramount to everything, but beyond that, it's the desire and the inspiration to want to be able to play the game for the rest of my life. That's really it in a nutshell. And so that kind of forces you to sit down at the kitchen table and think, be really focused on what you're eating and what you're doing, and to make sure that you look after yourself. So where do you see health and wellness fitting into the pickleball world in your perspective, based on what you did for a living and also just as a pro player and a fan of the game?
Well, pickleball is a huge contributor to not only mental wellness but physical fitness.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm speaking at a health fair, so
Right.
that's why I'm speaking. It's
Great.
the benefits that pickleball has on people. And you're saying you'd like to play in your 80s. Well, now that I'm 70, I want to play in my 90s. I used to say 80. 10 years ago, I'd say I want to play in my 80s, but now I want to play in my 90s. So,
Good for you.
we're on our feet. I'm on my feet every day, either teaching or playing.
Yeah.
Well, being on your feet, moving,
Yes.
just doing that, doing a weight bearing activity. I'm working on balance. I mean, you just take for granted that you have balance when you're 70. Not all 70-year-olds have good balance. So, and the leg strength that we're building, the cardio that we're building. Here, I have a wearable. Mine's Whoosh. Here we
Okay.
go.
There
Well,
we go.
what I'm proud of is, I don't know if yours will tell you this, but I will go under health, and I will look at my physical age.
Yep.
Well, my physical age is 10 years younger than my
Wow.
chronological age.
There you go.
And that would not happen without being on my feet every day doing an activity like pickleball. Now, I
Right.
could spend my time exercising. Would I do that? Probably not, because this is just a motivator. I don't feel like I'm exercising. It doesn't feel like work. It's fun, and I'm getting exercise.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
mean,
Well, we talked
if
about how much you enjoyed the work that you did, Steve. And so, at that point, it's no longer work. It's a passion, and you're
right,
making a difference, changing the world. And I think if we find something post working, past our working career, that gets us up in the morning, and that when we go to bed tonight, we're already thinking about that activity tomorrow. And that's pickleball for me. It certainly is for you, and has been, will continue to be. I picked up curling this year as well. Another very
yeah,
social sport, and I love it. And I'm not particularly good at it, but that's all part of the learning curve. But yeah, anything that gives me social engagement, helps me reach those 10,000 steps a day, and keeps me active, I'm all for. So yeah, pretty fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all of that. Can we jump into the documentary that you were featured in recently that just came out on
mhm.
Documentary Plus? How was that experience? I had a chance to watch it a couple days ago, and I felt it was well done. What was that experience of filming that documentary like for you?
Well, the actual filming, we did that at Nationals maybe 2.5 years ago. And
Right.
that was much like sitting down with you doing this podcast. For,
Okay.
my section, it was much like that, except we were in a studio.
Yeah.
Um, and they asked me questions, I'm answering. So I think, okay, I wonder if that's ever going to come out. So I mean,
Sure.
that's what I'm thinking for 2 years. And then last summer, I get a phone call from Rusty Howes from the Pickleball channel, saying,
Right.
"Hey, the movie's about to come out. We're going to have a premiere at the Fox movie lot at the famous Zanuck Theater. We'd like you to come." Well, yeah, I'm going to come. That
For sure.
I've never been to a movie premiere. Wow. And then Rusty says, and you're in it. So, when you do interviews on the news and things, and
Yeah.
sometimes they never put it on, or you're on for a split second.
Yes.
So I thought I'd just be in for a little bit. Well, I it seems like most everything that they asked me was they kept in the film. And so watching it in the Zanuck Theater with my significant other Lala, and looking up and seeing my dad on the screen and my
Wow.
friends, was
Mm.
just it was really moving to me. And there were some other really good uh, people featured in the movie too, and it covered the history better than anything that's been out on film. Jennifer
Yeah.
LaCour and her mom did the book, and then now we have the movie. It was it's really a good movie. And now it's this next week coming up. It will be on Apple and Amazon Prime.
Oh, wow. Good.
That's
Good.
starting the 16th. So I think now then we'll really. And I would say people who don't play pickleball who watch this
Yeah.
may go, I think I'm going to give this sport a try.
Good. Yeah, I agree. I think it should be. I think actually, to go back to your point just now, Steve, I think both that documentary in whatever format it comes out and Jennifer's book should be mandatory. I think
Yeah,
I think we should pass a law. Maybe you can start that, make a
yeah.
motion. But I think you should watch both of those or read both of those or take both of those in whatever format they're presented because it really expressed everything about the game. I thought it was well done. And Chuck, actually, we talked about our friend Chuck McDonald earlier
Mhm.
before the call started, and yeah, Chuck gave me his copy of Jennifer's book, autographed, of course, to Chuck. So it's sitting on my coffee table. I began
Yeah.
reading it a couple days ago. It's just such a great part of it. Just very quickly, I'm watching the clock, so I'm being very careful here. But I did have a chance to talk to a gentleman named Johannes Lozitsky, who wrote a
Oh
book
yeah.
about the Bicentennial Tournament. And he referenced you very fondly in our call last week. And I'm wondering, what about that moment, Steve, in 1976? Do you remember? Long before the paddle technology your dad invented in 1984. So obviously playing with the old technology. What about that day sits with you? I know there's a quote in Jennifer's book that you offered up about that day. I'm just curious to hear it from you today.
Well, it's not just that day that I remember in my head. I remember seeing a flyer at my community college that tournament was going to happen, and my
Okay.
my partner at the time, Dave Lester, and we had never lost to anybody in doubles ever to anybody. Thought, oh, let's go play
Yeah.
that tournament, and be
Sure.
the champion, and go play and be the champions. And so they had a practice day the night before or the week before, and
Hmm.
we had been using the wrong size ball for nearly 2 years. We
Oh,
were using a softball, so we had to learn in a week how to use a baseball size plastic wiffle ball instead of a softball size. So I
okay.
remember that's one thing I remember. The next thing I remember, we walk into the club and it's carpet, so we're playing
Right.
on carpet for the first time.
Like, what is
Which
going
later on I wound up playing a lot of tournaments on,
on?
uh,
Okay.
and then just lots of people in there. And I remember looking,
Yeah.
oh, he played I played against him in tennis. He played for this other so there were a lot of community college
Sure.
tennis players in this tournament. And many of them were better at me in tennis, but I was better at them in pickleball. So I remember that, and I remember it's playing. Singles was kind of the big deal back then,
Hmm.
and looking at the draw, going, oh, good, Dave's on the other half as the draw, because I had never beaten Dave, my partner.
Okay.
He was the top badminton player, good table tennis player. He was the first one to really combine with those things. And so, oh, good. So if I beat everybody in my half, I'll get to play Dave in the finals. Well, I did beat
Yeah.
everybody in my half, and he did beat everybody in his half. And so we got to play in the finals. And I
Wow.
lost. I lost to my partner in the finals,
Well,
and that was no surprise to me. But I thought we would win the doubles. But we played Scott Stover and Rob Cahill, who learned on
yes.
the real court. They're about
Right.
8 years older than us. We're still good
Hmm.
friends. We're going to try to reenact that
Oh,
final
no
again
kidding.
this summer, because it's the 50th
Good.
anniversary, and we'll do it on
Yes,
Bainbridge Island. And I still keep in touch with those guys. Isn't that crazy? And they
it
were
is.
older than us. And I remember thinking, well, I'm 20 years old. They're
Yeah.
almost 30. They're so old. There's no way 30-year-olds can beat us.
Yeah.
But they sort of
Yeah.
did a dink. I mean, it wasn't today's
Oh,
dink,
okay.
but we had
Right.
never seen that. I mean, why don't they hit it? And
What's wrong with these guys?
yeah,
Yeah.
and all I remember was that we lost, but then I found out later it was a close match, but
Sure.
I don't, all I remember is losing. But I mean, and my dad and mom were watching, and I didn't realize at the time, but I was playing in front of one of the inventors. In fact, we beat him earlier in the tournament. I did remember, yeah, you're playing these guys that invented the game. And really?
Wow.
Okay. And
Okay. Yeah.
but yeah,
Wow.
but there's a picture of me hitting an overhead today.
Yes.
That's the current picture, and Barney McCallum is sitting on the sideline, which is one of the
Yeah.
inventors. Which that would be like, I was a big basketball fan. Be like playing
Sure.
basketball in front of Mr. Naismith, Dr. Naismith.
Yeah.
You know, he
Can
had
you
a picture
imagine?
like that, right?
Yeah.
So
What a
I
moment, Steve.
really,
Yeah.
really, yeah, that was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. And
Yeah.
here there's a picture in that book, the Bicentennial book, and you can see my
Yeah.
parents in the audience.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Johannes was an interesting conversation and a very passionate gentleman and 86 years old today, so I had a
Yeah.
chance to chat with him and it was a moment and had, having a chance to do that before talking to you, I was really intrigued by it. So Steve, final, just couple of questions. I would love for you to expand on your idea behind your podcast. I mean, I've watched a ton of them and I love it. I love your format. And you had Eric Lang on the other day and, just some really great guests. And I just love your format. I love the Playhouse. And there's a lot of really neat photos. There's a bowling photo. I assume that's your dad that's kind of over your left shoulder. And there's just a lot of memorabilia in that room. Obviously, the Playhouse is something special. And yeah, you said earlier it was a dream come true. It's a dream come true for all of us who play pickleball. We all want our own Playhouse, I think, at some point. But tell me about the podcast and the concept behind that and how it's going.
Yeah. Well, I try to do things that haven't been done before, and there's plenty of podcasts. And about 7 years ago, Lala and my girlfriend, we had a live call-in show back then. It was called
Okay.
Pickleball Talks. It was the first of its kind where it was live. We were live.
Wow.
And we were losing money on it every month, but it was a passion, right? And I had, at the time, the best, the top players in the world were on my show. Tyson McGuffin, Simone Jargim, these are the top players in the world at that time.
Nice.
And Catherine Paranto, we found out we're actually distant cousins, by the way. But now there's so many pickleball podcasts, but there's, at the time when we started ours, Pickleball Fountain of Youth 2 years ago, there wasn't really anything geared for seniors.
Right.
And so I'm now a senior, I'm obviously a senior. I don't feel like a senior, but I thought, well, let's cover the topics that seniors are interested in. I want some important topics for people our age. Dave Rumpf, in fact, he was my college roommate at my second college, my doubles partner in tennis. He's visiting again this weekend with his brother. His brother's now one of my partners.
Nice.
And they're staying at the Playhouse. We're playing. But he was an optometrist for 30 years and knows a lot about sports vision. So there's an example. I had Dave on talking a lot about, okay, we're seniors. What kind of glasses are best to play pickleball in? See distance? We want ones that you can see, sharp here. No, what surgery should we have when we're seniors, when it's time to get our LASIK surgery? Important things. Lots of things that deal with seniors. And then the last one with Eric Lang as well. He's not a senior, but he is kind of considered a senior on the Pro Tour. Yeah. And he's coaching some of the best young people in the world. So just trying to get the point of view from senior pickleball players.
You would hear me say quite often, Steve, that I like the game, but I love the people. And I say that with the utmost respect for the game. But for me, it's the people behind the paddle, the stories behind the paddle. And someone once said to me, it's one of the few games where you can be on the court with a bank manager, a bank teller, and a bank robber. So that was quoted somewhere. I think you probably heard that. But
one of my guests, Steve, that was Jason Johnson, one of the guests on my show. Who he's the one that at one time was a convicted felon, drug issue problem, and now he's a famous AA speaker who speaks at. I wish I could tell you the famous people that he associates with as people like, oh man, you're kidding. Oh yeah, they're just normal people, But and so that episode was really about pickleball is his healthy addiction.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'm talking to a gentleman named Roger Belair. You may know Roger, but he started a not-for-profit, Steve, where he's taking pickleball into the prison system in the U.S.
Yes.
and helping rehabilitate. So Roger and I are hooking up in a week or week and a half to chat about his program and his passion, and I think that'll be an interesting story. So I applaud you for what you're doing with your podcast, and I want to thank you for today. It's been wonderful to meet you, and appreciate your time. So thanks for doing this.
Oh, thank you.